right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cecil Chick, and I use female pronouns she, her, and hers. Thank you for joining the third installment of our Critical Conversation post-election series brought to you by the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Programs. Today, our speaker will be providing self-care practices during this election season. But before we get started with this program, I wanted to provide some housekeeping information for our attendees today. First, I wanted to point out that we are using a Zoom webinar, and that means that you'll be muted and the camera function will not be available throughout the session. If you do wish to ask any questions related to the topic today or any follow-up questions, please utilize the Q&A function located in the bottom of the menu bar to ask your questions. And if at any point you wish to speak to a counselor from CAPS, please submit a request in the Q&A function as well. One of our staff members will provide another Zoom link for you to speak to a counselor in another session. Anything posted in the Q&A function will be anonymous to all the other participants in this session. The dialogue today will be recorded and posted with closed captioning on the DIEP YouTube channel for everyone else to enjoy. Finally, at the end of this program, we'll be sending out a feedback form with a survey and also resources from today's session using the email that you use to register. Our next Critical Conversation post-election series will be next Monday, November 18th at 11:30 with Dr. Bailene Shaw, where she will be discussing ways to have difficult conversations with close friends and family. So to kick off our event today, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Portia Jackson Preston. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for joining us and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction. Again, my name is Portia Jackson Preston. I'm an assistant professor of public health here at Cal State Fullerton. And my research area, I actually look at multi-level approaches to self-care. So not just what we do at the individual level, but the resources we need to have in place at the community, organization, and policy levels in order to make well-being a practical reality for all. I also study this through the lens of health equity, which means I spend a lot of time thinking about steps that we need to take to build a more equitable society on the basis of race, gender, or socioeconomic status, and other factors. So in today's presentation, what I'm going to invite you all to do is join me on this journey where we sort of detox from what's going on right now. There was a lot of stress, anxiety, and tension last week when we were going through the election process. And now that the results have come in, we're still working through this feeling of what comes next, what do we need to be ready for? And in my informal conversations with different faculty and staff and students throughout this week, I know that there's a variety of perspectives. Some people are feeling excited, some people are feeling a great deal of pain. And so what I would like to do is invite you to come into this space and just for the next hour and a half, take some time to think through what your needs are and then what we can do to help you build resilience for the road ahead. So while the launching point for today is politics, we actually are not going to be spending much of our time there. We're really focusing on equipping you with the tools that you need for self-care. So what I always like to do at the beginning of my presentations is just kind of level set and ask people, how are they feeling today? And before I do this, I want to make sure I go back and give you all the information you need to join this presentation. For many of you, Mentimeter may be a new tool. And so I want to go ahead and pop the instructions on the screen for a moment so that you can join. The reason that I use Mentimeter is I like for my sessions to be completely anonymous so that people feel comfortable sharing their perspectives. So this will be an interactive conversation between you and I. Many times you will see something pop up on the screen that you didn't say, but you relate to. So that's part of the power of this platform, rather than if we were to do it in Zoom, where you would have to basically unmask yourself when you share your perspective. So I'm going to ask you to either use the QR code if you have your smartphone in front of you, or go to this website, menti.com, and enter the code at the bottom, 1475121. Now, it is not going to ask you to download anything. It is not going to ask you for any identifying information. It's just going to allow you to participate anonymously in this conversation. So I'm going to give you all a few moments to log on to this. I will keep the QR up for another 5 seconds and then go back to the main screen. Again, if you have a computer in front of you to view the presentation, that's wonderful. If you do have a phone, it's great to have the separate screen for typing. But if you need to do both on one screen, you can. You just need to go to this website either on your phone or your computer. And once you are here, I'm going to ask you to send a heart. You see this at the bottom right of the screen. That just lets me know that people have joined this presentation. Okay, great. Seeing several of you coming in now. And great, I also see comments popping up. If you do a comment, it will pop up on the screen for about 5 seconds, long enough for me to read it. So I'm really grateful to you in advance. I want you to know this. The energy of this session is really built upon your engagement and participation. So I really do welcome you to participate with us in this way. And thank you so much for the comments coming in. I know there's a few of you who've gone through this before, but I always try to do something different or unique. I'm excited to have you. Great. Okay, so I have about half of you in the room. I'm hoping to get to, so you have 29 attendees. So I'm hoping to really get towards maybe like 25 or 26. However, if you're in a situation where you cannot log into the software, I'm still going to give you a way to participate. You can actually put your comments in the Q&A. And of course, it's only going to be read by the panelists. I won't be able to read them out loud, but we will see your perspectives. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. If you need this information anytime, it will remain on the top of the screen. So describe how you feel currently in one word. A few of you were already to enter, so thank you. Some of you feel proud, hopeful, relieved, happy, cautious, relaxed. Okay, good. Nervous, yeah, definitely. Anxious. So you can see just with the 30 or so of us who are here today, there's a range of different emotions, but one of the dominant themes is hopeful. I also see ambivalent, I see steady. So I want to make space for your emotions, your feelings, just what they are. I'm not here to change them. I want to teach you the power of just being able to note where you are and find the resources that you need. So that is our focus for today. But it really feels good just to kind of, in a space where we can't see each other visually, be able to see that we're not alone in the questions that we're asking and the emotions that we're feeling. So I also see some people saying overwhelmed. Okay, I see optimistic. That's wonderful. And I also see in the Q&A, someone said still anxious. So all of these are valid. I think I can co-sign many of these emotions. I personally have been feeling very mixed emotions in the past few days and taking steps to take care of myself. And those are the techniques that I hope to share with you today. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to help everyone just sort of ground yourselves and enter the room in this space. So if you're in a position where you feel comfortable closing your eyes, I'm going to invite you to do so. I'm going to read this quote to you and then ask you a few questions. You don't need to type for a moment. You can just rest. Okay, when you're ready, just go ahead and take a deep breath and release it. Everything we want to change in the world around us also exists right here in our bodies. We carry the histories of our people's trauma and our individual struggles. They are here, both strengthening us with what they have taught us and also holding us back as our fears, anxieties, and survival strategies keep us away from the things that can most support our liberation. This quote by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, I like to use at the beginning of my presentations because it reminds us that we aren't just here to carry out our roles as faculty, staff, or students. We are an embodiment of all of the experiences that we've been through. And so if we are gathered together in this space to help empower each other and create a better tomorrow, we do have to give some attention to our own experiences and the ways in which we are coping with it and caring for ourselves so that we can show up as our full selves in our work. So now I'm going to ask you a few questions. You can keep your eyes closed if you like. When is the last time that you really just took a moment to think about yourself and your own needs? For some of us, it's as recent as this morning. And for many of us, we can't think of the last time when we thought about ourselves and not the needs of others. So I want to invite you in this moment to acknowledge whatever it is that's occupying your mind and your space as you come in today, whether it's upcoming tasks that you need to get done, a conversation that you had with a friend or loved one, or general anxiety that you're feeling in this moment. I want to invite you to gingerly take it and set it to the side. For the remainder of our time together, I'm going to invite you to focus on yourself and your own needs so that you can use the information that you're gaining today to help others. So I'm going to invite you to take another deep breath. And As you open your eyes, I want you to think about what is your intention for today? What is one thing that you want to focus on while you're in today's session? And if you have anything that comes to mind, I want to invite you to go ahead and just post it as a comment. It can be one thing you're hoping to take out of this. Okay, someone says centering. It could be about how you want to approach today's session, being aware, devoting your attention and not multitasking. Okay, I'm going to invite you to continue to post your intentions, and I'm going to share a few of my own. So someone else says being present. Wonderful. So during this time, I have chosen equanimity. This is the ability to be mentally calm, composed, and have an even temper, especially in difficult situations. So I think about what we're going through right now. I think about the complexity that's present even on our campus. And I know that I want to find a way to offer to myself and others the ability to be calm and to deal with our anxieties. Okay, I see other people talking about releasing anxiety, leaning towards others. Good. Pushing by the boundaries they've created and grow, slow down. These are all beautiful intentions. Wonderful. How to let it be. Good, good. Okay, so now that you have your intentions in mind, you have those others that are gathered here, you have an idea of how you want to focus your energy as you go through today's session. And I believe that what you put into this will be what you get out of it. Okay. All right. Another person says to let go. So I want to anchor today's talk in this concept that we spend a lot of time talking about on campus. We always hear this message of grit and resilience. And I think that it's important to define resilience not in this ability just to like be strong no matter what happens and push through, but it's actually this idea that life does knock you down. Life does present you with challenges and obstacles, and you want to be able to have the resources to overcome, to be able to get through those experiences and to be able to experience growth as a result of the process. So that is the definition of resilience that I want to provide for you as we are working through this material today. Right now, we're dealing with the election cycle. We're also dealing with the pandemic. We're also dealing with racial and social injustices. There are so many different challenges in front of us, and I want to teach us ways that we can be resilient in the face of these. Okay. So here are a few tips that the American Psychological Association provides on building resilience. One is to connect with others, which you all are doing by coming together in this space today. The second is caring for yourself, which is the focus of today's session. The third is finding a sense of purpose, and I will be talking to you about that in the scope of today's session. And lastly, the ability to embrace a positive mindset. I always like to tell people I think of myself as a positive realist because I am optimistic, but not to the point where I'm numb to reality. So when I talk about embracing a positive mindset, it's about being able to deal effectively with the anxieties and the negative emotions that you have coming up, not to make those go away. And lastly, reaching out for help. As a reminder, at the beginning of the session today, we have made it available. CAPS is on standby. So if at any point you need to talk to someone about things that you're experiencing, you don't have to be confined to the questions I'm asking you in this presentation. You can reach out to David Mitchell, and also CAPS is available as a resource, as well as the Employee Assistance Program for staff and faculty. So I just want to remind us that we're not made to go through these challenges alone. It is healthy and positive for us to reach out to others for help. All right, so with that in mind, here are my goals for today's session. I am looking to discuss some of the key stressors in our current climate. Through my interactions with all of you, we're going to explore the extent to which you are currently using self-care practices to cope with stressors and promote well-being. I am going to be identifying some tools and resources that you can use for self-care and stress management. And I'm also going to be discussing some organization level strategies that we can use to promote the well-being of staff, faculty, and students. So those are my goals for today, but I always like to give my attendees an opportunity to articulate what they want to get out of today so that I know where I should spend a little bit more time. So this is an open-ended response. And so you don't need to use the comment function. You can type your open-ended response and it will show up on the screen completely anonymous. What are you hoping to gain from today's session? I think some of this has already been stated through your intentions. I saw in the chat, someone said they want to be able to find peace with their family. Many of you talked about being able to let go. So you don't need to repeat yourself if you've already stated it, but if there's anything you haven't been able to offer yet, I welcome you to go ahead and post it here. Okay, making it through the holiday season. Yes. Tools for self-care. Absolutely, we'll explore that. Strategies for staying calm and productive in busy and stressful times. Great. Okay. Making it through the holiday season. Yeah. Yeah, we have this coming up very soon. And I know there's going to be another upcoming session on civic dialogue and engaging in conversations with people, whether you see eye to eye or not. So that's going to be an important resource for us in the days to come. Okay, I want to thank all of you who are inputting your responses. It really helps. Learning how to take some time for yourself. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that today. We're definitely going to deal with the guilt that often comes up when we are trying to do this. Setting boundaries, good. Learning how to bridge the gap, learning how to stay positive through the pandemic. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I know there may be additional responses coming in. I want to assure you, even if I move ahead on a slide, the team will be able to gather these results and use them moving forward. So please don't feel stressed if I move on and you're still typing something in. We will receive it. Okay, so I want to share something with you. I'm going to try to alternate between giving information and asking for answers so you have a little bit of a break. This is a graphic that I used with my stress management class recently that talks about the different phases of disaster recovery. And I was basically telling them that if you look at this map for different phases of disaster recovery, and you think about where we've been in the pandemic, you can start to understand some of the emotions that we're feeling. So if you want to think of this pre-disaster phase sort of as the months leading up to it being declared as a pandemic, then we had this heroic and honeymoon phase where people came together and we were really cheering on essential workers and healthcare workers. And really, we kept saying, let's stay home for each other and we're together in this. And so you might guess where we are now. There's a lot of disillusionment going on. And other events that are maybe not even related to it, such as the election, are trigger events because we have these peaks of anxiety that are happening. And we have to figure out, I think we're sort of cycling where we're starting to think about how can we work through the grief that we're experiencing, this loss of normalcy. And I want to spend a moment on this because I can't address the election stress without addressing the fact that it took place during the pandemic. So wherever you find yourself right now on this graph, I just want to convey to you that you are not alone and that there are all types of trigger events that are happening in our lives right now that kind of send us backwards in our recovery. And that's not you. That is cyclical. This is how we work through disasters. So many of the resources that we're going to discuss today are going to help you think about reconstruction. But I don't want you to be discouraged when you are feeling disillusioned or when you are feeling hopeless and isolated. I think that it's important that we normalize these experiences. We're beginning to see data coming in now talking about increased anxiety and depression and the effects of this isolation on all of us. It takes a toll. And I think that it's wonderful for us to have an opportunity together to come together as a community and to think about how can we support each other in working through this. So that is my goal in sharing the slide with you, just to sort of normalize the experiences that you are feeling and that we're going to continue to experience, but we're going to be trying to find ways to actually work through this together. The second slide, I developed this in the days leading up to the election. Based on a survey conducted by the American Psychological Association, there was a consistent increase in stress in the days leading up to the 2020 election that actually outpaced the stress that we saw prior to the 2016 election. What's more, when they asked about party affiliation, it really didn't matter what party people were a member of. At least 2/3 of them were experiencing feelings of stress. So this is another thing that I offer to people just to help you understand, you're not bad at dealing with stress. What you're feeling right now doesn't mean that you aren't doing the work and you're not doing a good job. I personally have found that I have to be consistently dedicated to self-care moment by moment to help myself deal with this. So any feelings of stress that you have are absolutely understandable and normal. However, it's really important that we address this because we now have data that shows us that following the last election, there was actually a twofold increase in hospitalizations related to cardiovascular disease events, such as heart attacks and strokes. I don't share this to discourage you or to make you feel terrified. It's just to help you understand that stress does have an impact on our health. And given that we're now going through a pandemic, and regardless of how you feel about the outcome of the election, there is still work to do going ahead to build this future reality. And that can be stressful for many of us. There's a lot of tension and anxiety around things that we don't have certainty on or things that we don't quite know yet. And so I think that it's essential that, just by you showing up to today's activity, you're taking time to prioritize your well-being, to understand your stress and effectively address it so that you can navigate this time with more resilience. Okay, so that's no more stats today. I know that was scary enough. We're going to start learning a little bit more about the people who are here today. So I'm going to ask you to just indicate what is your primary affiliation. So if you occupy multiple roles listed here, I want you to think about the one where you spend 50% or more of your time. Okay, so there's definitely a spread here. It looks like we are pretty evenly split between students and, oh, well, now the numbers changed. Okay, classified staff followed by students and faculty and management. So I'm really grateful that you all are here today, and I'm going to do my best to try to articulate strategies so that they work for each of you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to sort of, get to know who is with us on the call today. Okay, great. So the reason I did that first slide is so that now we can actually segment how we are experiencing stress based on our affiliation with the university. And I do this so that people understand that whether you are a student, faculty, staff, management, executive leadership, we all are going through this and we all have stressors. So take a moment to read these stressors and you can check as many of them as currently apply to you. I'm going to read them out loud for the benefit of anybody who cannot read this slide. Concerns about COVID-19, racialized trauma, the political landscape, isolation, remote delivery of instruction and services. So for students, this also means if you are taking classes online, if you are staff and you are providing services online, or you are teaching online for faculty, that's what all of those are remote delivery. If you are helping to teach children or family members, if you have increased caregiving responsibilities, dealing with access to basic needs such as food and housing. And then I have a generalized uncertainty about the future. And finally, if you don't feel stressed in any of these areas, you can click not applicable. So I'm going to give this a moment to come in. And I want to say thank you to all of you who are participating in this. You can see that this allows us to capture some pretty cool real-time data. Okay, so it appears that we have the greatest response is concerns about COVID-19, just where we are going with this, how much longer this is going to last, concerns about those of who have been affected, either themselves or a loved one, potential loss due to COVID-19, risking one's health and well-being because they have to be out and they cannot socially distance. There are so many different concerns that we have about COVID-19. Oh, I want to say thank you to the comment that just came in. Someone said this normalizes their experience a lot. Thank you. That's really what this is designed for. After that, we have just this global uncertainty about the future. What is the reality that we're going to face? What is this new normal going to become? It's really hard to plan for the future right now because so many things are changing. And I think that's enough for all of us to be experiencing some anxiety. Okay, next, the political landscape. Understandable. We are 1 week out of this election. There are so many valid perspectives to be addressed. There are so many challenges that we're still trying to wade through. It's not final yet. There's so much to come. And so I want to acknowledge that and the stress that it can present. Also, let's see, we have about a 4-way tie between feelings of isolation, which we're all experiencing, remote delivery of instruction and services, teaching children and family members. Look at this one for a moment. I want you to see that we have students, we have staff, we have faculty, and we have management who are teaching children or family members from home, in addition to our primary roles here at Fullerton. Also, many of us are experiencing increased caregiving responsibilities. And we have students and staff who need support and resources to access basic needs such as food and housing during this time. So it's really important that we continue to think about what we can do as a campus community to provide support, making sure people are aware of resources such as TUFIs, basic needs. It's really important that we do not gloss over this because people can't really take care of the other elements of self-care without having their basic needs met. And then I think I skipped over this one, but it's something that's very important to me, racialized trauma. What is the energy and weight that it takes to show up as a member of a marginalized population right now? If you feel like you are having to assert your own validity of worth and question whether or not the world lines up with your own evaluation of yourself, how are all of these events that are happening affecting you? Do you have to go into spaces, academic or professional, and pretend like those things aren't happening so that you can focus on your job? If so, what toll does that take? So I always like to use this slide in my classes and in my presentations, and I'm letting it sit here for a moment for a reason, because if you aren't experiencing one of these, I want you to realize that of the people that are gathered right now in this presentation, there are many people who are. And how effective can we be in our work? How can we engage in sustainable performance? How can students persist in their studies if we don't acknowledge the reality of the challenges they're facing? So I'm hoping that this will give you some thought, some time after this, maybe that you can spend reflecting on this and thinking about how can you better show up and support people who may be going through stressors that are similar to or different from your own. So thank you so much for participating in that. Okay, so now I am going to invite you to tell me what your current level of stress is. We've talked about few stressors. I want to acknowledge there are stressors that I didn't indicate on that slide, so you're not limited to just those. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I believe, let me know how much stress you are experiencing right now. Okay, so we're hovering around a 7, and you can see there's a great deal of variation here. There's many people that reported higher levels of stress and a few that reported lower levels. But to give you a general idea, I believe when the American Psychological Association asked this question of people, in general, the answers hovered between 5 and 6. I want to say back in like June or July. And then when they asked people who were caregivers, we were closer to a 7. So there's definitely a variation in how we're experiencing stress right now. I want to underline that stress is very subjective. What makes one person feel very stressed might make another person feel invigorated. So it's very important to attend to how stress is affecting you personally and not to measure yourself by the experiences of others. So now I want to ask you a question. What is helping you to cope with either the stressors I mentioned or other stressors that I did not mention? Part of the attention here is for you to share what you've experienced, but if you don't have any good ideas, my hope is that by seeing some of the answers show up on the screen, knowing that these are people who are in the similar roles to yourself, it may give you some ideas, okay? So far we see family and working out, right? Spending time outside, walking and taking time alone, cooking, friends, exercise, spending time with pets, meditation and setting intentions for the day. Good, very powerful. Exercise, long walks with friends, mindfulness, nice, video diary, meditation, spending time with friends and family outdoors, spiritual activities, art, baking, watching company TV shows, gardening, exercise. Great. So I do this just to show people how they're already engaging in self-care. As I go through some of the definitions today, you'll be able to see that many of you are doing self-care in ways that you may not have seen as self-care before. But a lot of people are saying family. Okay, great. Someone said, don't watch too much news. So this is a perfect time for me to address this. I wanted to wait for it to come up organically. What I've been doing for myself is I find it very important to stay informed, but not overwhelmed. And so I generally try to read about one article per day that just gives me a really good synthesis of what's going on. And then, of course, I gloss over the other headlines. If there's something that is of interest to me, I click on it. But what I don't want to do, or I'll say what I did poorly at the beginning of the pandemic, I checked email. I checked the news all the time. And it didn't change that often, but it did result in making me feel very panicked. So I personally find once a day to be that sweet spot. There are days where I don't check it. And that's a big change for me from the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm not telling you what you have to do. What I want you to do is to monitor how you feel before, during, and after. So if you are already in an anxious headspace, is this a good time for you to check? If so, what source do you want to check? I tend to look at NPR. I believe Axios and Reuters are also recommended as just being more straightforward outlets. I think it's important for you to look for a place where you can find thorough reporting that is going to help educate you on the issues, but you do not have to languish in it. Even if you're checking it every day, you can do it in a way that helps you to stay well and be informed but not overwhelmed. Someone else said no social media. There are times where I take the social media apps off of my phone, or I put app block on there. It is a resource that blocks certain apps during certain times off of my phone. Someone else said, it's hard for me to separate the news in case I missed something. How do you overcome that? I honestly focus on what is under my control and what I can contribute. So will knowing XYZ really empower me to take action in a productive manner? Or is it really helping their ratings? Obviously, they have to, have watchers, but does that need to be me every single day, every single moment? So I would say finding a trusted resource for you and reading that, if you read the newspaper once a week, or you read something that has more format analysis like The Atlantic once a week, figuring out for yourself what is a rhythm where you can stay informed and not overwhelmed. So I would say it's a hard argument as to why, even at the extreme, you would need to check the news more than 2 or 3 times a day, unless you are literally, a reporter who is working on stories. And even if you're that person, I still want you to find time to unplug, because many times we're just finding different ways to say different things, or we are piecing through the picture until we can kind of come to a more holistic interpretation of what's happening. So a lot of news is actually watching stories evolve. And then we sit back and we're able to see it with more perspective as time goes on. Other people talked about taking a break from technology, where they're absolutely encouraged. Cleaning, that's a good one. Doing something creative, unfollowing some people. So you can see there's a lot of different coping strategies here, and I'm not asking you to embrace all of them. What I really want to do with today's session is help you identify strategies that sound encouraging for you. So if you're in a position where you can take notes, just kind of note the things that are popping up that really resonate with you. All right. The other thing that I like to talk about, I mentioned earlier, finding purpose. So it's really important during this time where there is so much going on that is capturing our attention, that we really understand what is my purpose and what gives me hope. What will allow me to navigate through this time? What makes it worth continuing to push and move forward, to do the work that is in front of me? So I want you to take a moment and just think about what gives you hope for the road ahead. And again, it's okay if you don't have an answer in this moment. You can read what's coming in from other people. Okay, good. My children. Okay. Someone says Biden, my fave. Finding a new normal, coming together, my life goals, the potential for healing. That's really beautiful. Possibilities, political change. Okay. Health, resilience under pressure. Beautifully said. Okay. Someone else says Kamala Harris. My husband and children. Okay. So again, your answer may be different from these. Your answer may be reflected here. The point is for you to figure out what gives you hope for moving forward. So take some time to think about this, because I always, when I am working with different populations, and this is even before the pandemic, I always ask people, come back to your why. What is making it worthwhile to get up in the morning? For students, what is making it worthwhile for you to work on your degree? I know for a lot of faculty and staff, we find a great deal of satisfaction in our roles from being able to help our students. And so for me, I do have personal goals that I want to achieve, but a lot of what gives me hope right now is knowing that I have a platform to be able to empower students going through what might be one of the most difficult phases of their lives. And that really helps me stay engaged. It helps me to prioritize my well-being because I know that if I don't take care of myself, I won't be able to help them. So that's something that for me really gives me a lot of purpose. And I know that it's something where if I don't take it in moderation, I can overdo it. So think about healthy ways to reflect on, what matters to you and to engage in it so that it helps you when things get trying. Thank you so much. Someone said this helps me remember what's important. Yeah, and I think it's really powerful just to see this collage popping up of what is really inspiring our community during this time. So thank you all for participating in that. All right, so now I would like to know from your honest perspective, you don't have to try to have a formal definition here. It can be positive, it can be negative, but what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the term self-care? Okay, someone says necessary. Meditation, good. How do I do this? Selfish. Yeah, definitely. Definitely something I struggle with. Having boundaries. I don't have the time for self-care. It's important. Good. Yeah, I think it's important to get everything out right now because if we don't acknowledge the barriers and the things that discourage us from this, there's no way that we're going to build a sustainable practice. Doing what makes you happy, calming, personal hygiene. Yeah, good, good. Using your voice, beautiful. Doing what you love, sleeping, good. It's hard to find time to do this. Okay, great. So already going into this, I have an idea of where you all are at and what some of the barriers are. We're going to be exploring this in more detail. A day of resting, good. Making myself proud, lovely. All right, thank you so much for this collective definition. It's really helpful for me to know where you are. So I want to give you some context here. This is something that I generally apply to organizations, but knowing that I have students here today, I wanted to make this a bit more general. Why is self-care important in your role? First and foremost, to protect your well-being. Secondly, to help you sustain your performance over time. We're in a marathon every single semester. It's very hard to run a 15-week sprint or a 16-week sprint plus finals. So I often have to think about how can I approach my work so that I don't burn out by week 10 or 11. So if I was only doing a semester for 2 weeks, I probably could forego some basic needs and just get the job done. But if I have to consistently teach over the length of the semester, I have to think about what are more sustainable practices. Same thing for students. It can help to improve your satisfaction in your role. So whether you are a faculty and staff member, management, you're thinking about your job satisfaction, but also if you're a student and you want to think about being satisfied with your academic journey, self-care is a vital component of that. And lastly, for faculty, staff, and management, helping you to fulfill your organizational mission. For students, helping you to fulfill your mission as a student. Most of you are looking at graduation as one of your goals. And as I said before, with this being a marathon, we have to run our race a little differently so that we can sustain ourselves. And we add to that the current stressors that we're going through. You really have to think about how can I care for myself so that I make sure that I follow through on the goals that I've set for myself. So I'm giving you guys a few resources that I have been using, and I actually want to thank, I believe this person is on right now as a participant, so she'll recognize this. One of my colleagues actually sent me this poster and said, this reminds me of you. And I got it from amplifier.org. That's amplifier.org. Amplifier.org has all kinds of posters that you can download, and they're beautiful art about different social justice themes. Yes, it was Carrie that gave it to me. Thank you so much, Carrie. So I actually have this as my desktop ever since the day she gave it to me, because it reminds me that I cannot do this important research on self-care. I cannot serve different communities if I don't preserve myself. So the images of the lush foliage, as well as the water hydrating the woman, just remind me to take care of myself as I do this work. So it doesn't have to be the same thing for you, but I deeply encourage you to find something that inspires you and reminds you of your hope and put it somewhere that you see it every single day, every single time that you engage in the work. Okay. The next thing I want to share with you, I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago and they had a vision board workshop and they taught us how to create a photo collage online using canva.com. That is CANVA, canva.com. And it is completely free to do this. I mean, they have paid resources, but for this, I just went in and I searched for photo collage. And when you do that, you get all these different templates. And then all I had to do was swipe in different pictures that I liked. So this is something that you can do with your student organization. You can do it with your class. You can do it on your own. But I really found it important for me because I think of my energy like a candle. And when I protect that flame, it can burn brightly and help others. But when I expose it to the harsh elements and I don't take care of myself, it is soon snuffed out. I will give you an analogy for the elections. When we did the elections in 2016, I actually live blogged it with my students. And you can imagine as the night wore on, that became increasingly difficult for me. So this time I had a different strategy and I was more conscious of the different ways that things could turn out. And I prepared myself for those realities. And that helped me so much better to just kind of get through this time. But I noticed that there were certain conversations I was not engaging in to protect my energy. So all of that is wrapped up in this visual for me. I see her and I know, okay, protect your energy. I think about my need for nutrition and hydration and fueling my body with good exercise on a daily basis, the use of meditation to ground me. I really enjoy nature, so I'm trying to find safe ways to engage with that right now. When I look at this, I think of everything I do with my students and in my research because connection and community with others really helps to fuel me. But I also think about the relationships that I have outside of my academic context that sustain me. So that is what that image means for me. And then this one is just personal to me. My morning devotion time really helps to sustain me. And then I just think about slowing down. I'm somebody who really gets used to running at a hard pace and then I burn myself out. So when I look at these images, they remind me collectively of how I want to intentionally live my life at this time. And by setting this vision board up just for getting through this year, I'm not putting off till January a fresh new start. I needed something to help me just get through the remaining months. So I encourage you to think of your own intentions and themes, some things that you want to remember to do that help make your life good, that may help you if you're experiencing depressive, if you're feeling depressing feelings, in addition to reaching out and getting help from psychological resources, which I strongly encourage, things you can also do for yourself on a daily basis, just to remind yourself of what makes life good. So that's another resource. And I just wanted to show you guys these things so you realize that I am a human being. I go through this stuff. I have to remind myself. And I wanted to show you some ways that I do that. All right. So now that we have talked a lot and we've explored self-care, I want to bring your attention to a framework that we use. I believe this is from the field of social work. And the self-care plan that I will be showing you today is actually built on these 6 different areas. They don't have to all apply to you. You can pick the areas that most strongly resonate for you. But for the purposes of today's workshop, we are going to focus on physical, psychological, emotional, and workplace or professional self-care. Okay, so I invite you to explore the spiritual and relationship on your own at a later time. I just wanted to grab 4 core categories that I thought everyone could probably speak to. For students, when I say academic professional, if you are not currently in a professional setting working, I want you to think about your academic journey and how you can practice self-care in your academic life. Okay, so don't worry about writing all of this down because all of this is going to be in the self-care plan that I'm going to provide links to later. This is just examples of different practices. And now we're going to do an interactive demonstration so we can see in real time, how are you all engaging in self-care? I also want to distinguish, I tend to talk about community care in the context of self-care, but I know for many people we're distinguishing these 2 terms. So I want to acknowledge what we're doing today as community care because we are showing up together. We're validating each other's experiences. We are exploring ways that we can persevere and be resilient. And that's what this DIEP series is all about. They are bringing the Titan community together to talk about how do we process what has been happening during this election cycle? How do we come together as a diverse Titan community to support each other? And how do we build the road ahead? because as we are going through this, we are also going through the final round of midterms, starting to prepare for finals, wanting to finish the semester strong, taking some time to relax and disengage for a bit, and then coming back strong in the spring. And so we are not just looking at this as a way to get through elections. We're looking at this as a roadmap to resilience that we can continue to build so that we can get through this time and come out on the other side stronger. All right. So just to get started, how would you rate your current approach to self-care? And the options range from not a priority at all to essential. Think of it not in terms of, oh, I think it's important. It's how are you actually engaging in it? Okay, so I want to acknowledge that for most of us, there's some room for improvement here. You can see that many of us are sort of hovering between, well, I know this is important, but maybe I really haven't been prioritizing it in my life. And again, this is just something I throw up so that you don't feel alone. There are many people that are struggling to prioritize this in their lives. And maybe some of us are even working through, is this really a priority? I like to think of self care as a cornerstone for personal and professional development. I believe that when you have a strong foundation, you are more resilient. You're more able to show up and be persistent, resilient, creative, innovative, everything that our society needs to move forward, I think is built on a strong foundation of self care. But part of that work means redefining what we see as self care. So we're going to start this by looking at physical self care. And I just want you to think about, of the practices listed here, which of these do you do regularly? And it's okay to be honest, it's completely anonymous. Okay, so I know I still have responses coming in, but eating regularly, maybe this is something you didn't think of as self-care, but many of you are doing that well, good. Um, Getting medical care when needed, that's great as well. I want to acknowledge this comes up often as a pattern in my work. People are good about getting medical care when it's needed, but they're less good at taking time off when they're sick. And think about the implications for that during COVID-19. I know there's times where we feel like we have to push through. I definitely feel that as well. But I want to invite everyone, including myself, to reflect on what are the consequences in this time of continuing to push through when I'm sick, putting myself at greater risk for complications or for burnout, right? So we have to start thinking differently about what it looks like to promote our well-being, including taking time off to recover when we are feeling sick. And I realize that that may be a position of privilege if you're in a position where taking off might risk losing your employment or being viewed as somebody who is not committed to the cause. I don't present hard and fast solutions. I do present scenarios where we need to think about how can we better support each other in these areas and what do we need in order to be able to take care of ourselves. I realize that taking vacations is a little complicated right now. So I encourage people, if you can even just get outside for a few hours, just to disrupt your current context, doing so safely may also help you to recharge. Okay, so thank you so much for your participation here. I'm going to invite you all, each time that we do one of these slides, I want you to think about, is there something here that I do well? And is there something here that I would like to improve? So don't worry about this whole thing, but are there two things that kind of leap out at you that you either do well or want to improve, and just take note of that. You can see many of us are struggling to eat healthily, to exercise, and to get enough sleep. So if that's you, you are not alone. And there's some people that are acknowledging, I don't do any of these things. So that's okay. It's really about raising our awareness and taking small concrete steps, okay? All right, so next, psychological self-care practices. Which of these do you do regularly? my hope is that as we're going through this, maybe something's peeking out at you that you're going, oh, I didn't realize that that actually was helping to promote my well-being. Reading something unrelated to work. I think I had a moment, was it last year? I had told myself I didn't have time to read for pleasure because I had so much reading to do. And I actually realized that it was taking away some of my joy in life. And so now I make time to prioritize reading for just myself, even though I still have a lot of things to do, but it personally brings me a lot of joy. Um, One thing that we talked about at the beginning of today, taking time to listen to your thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, or feelings. Mindfulness is about being open and curious and exploring what you feel, but not judging it or criticizing it. And so notice that no matter what your feelings were at the beginning of the session today, I wanted everyone to feel welcome here, no matter what your experience has been of the election. Um, as we are going through this time, being able to acknowledge how you feel and take steps to address that and to understand that some feelings are just fleeting and they will pass in a moment, that can help you better navigate stress. So I really want to encourage you to think more about this one, okay? Um, I think that many people have acknowledged they have room for improvement when it comes to disconnecting from technology. What does this look like if you are constantly attached to your phone? Maybe it's taking 5 minutes away from it. Somehow we manage to eat and sleep most days. So we do some disconnection in our lives. And you can start with baby steps here. Okay. Experiment, figure out what works for you. But I think it's important to be able to step away from technology for a few moments and just to regain this sense of self without constantly, the moment we get bored or anxious or upset, we turn to our phones, which are sort of like pacifiers to placate us. Okay. And I say this with all the respect in the world because I struggle with this myself. But as I said, using things like app block have really helped me to stay away from the technology. And I think at 8 p.m., I actually cannot surf the internet on my phone. So it really does make me turn to other activities. Engaging in self-reflection is very important. We're doing that through this session today. Writing in a journal is another way to do that. So you see that here. Going to therapy, this is the least reported self-care practice. I want to be honest with you all and say in my first 2 years of being a professor, meeting with a therapist was the best thing that I did. I could not effectively show up for roughly 160 students if I wasn't taking steps to process what I was feeling and care for myself. So if you yourself are thinking about this and you've had experiences in the past that have made you feel like therapy is not right for you or that you shouldn't need it, I want to normalize it. I want to say that it's something that's been deeply meaningful for me and that it does take time to find a fit, but that's okay. So I definitely want to encourage you on that. Doing something to attend to minimizing stress in your life, focusing on what's under your control and just taking slow steps and realizing that you don't have to have everything figured out. Okay. So again, I'm going to pause for a moment. Think about one thing here that you're doing well and maybe one thing that you would like to improve. Okay, we're going to move forward. Oh, you're welcome. It can be intimidating because we've heard so much. I was speaking with a student this week and they were expressing that their family tells them that this is a sign of weakness. This is something that you shouldn't have to do. Options for those who cannot afford therapy. Depending on your county, there are different resources available. Many have sliding scale clinics. I will invite CAPS to post in the Q&A if that's possible, or maybe take a moment at the end and further address this because I think they're aware of resources, especially in the Orange County area that I'm not currently aware of. But yes, I'm going to let them answer that one at the end because I don't want to do a poor job of it now. But there are resources. One thing that comes to mind is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. There are warm lines that you can call. This is, if you think of a hotline as something you would call in a crisis, a warm line is something you can call when you are having perhaps like mental and anxious thoughts, you need someone to talk to. And I know that they have those live right now for Orange County and Los Angeles. So I'm going to hopefully allow David to address that at the end. Okay. Now, emotional self-care practices. Which are any of these do you do regularly? Okay, great. So many people said that they are spending time with people who nourish them, enjoying favorite books or movies, and seeking out comforting activities, people, or places, and finding ways to allow themselves to cry or laugh. Some of the students I've worked with in the past gave me the tip of watching a movie that you know makes you cry if you're having a hard time crying. I love that tip. I realize that some of these are difficult to do in this current reality. Spending time with people may not always be easy, especially for those of us who are living on our own, but trying to figure out ways that we can do so socially distancing, physically distancing, or using Zoom, phone calls, texts, but it's still important to connect with other people, okay? Um, Affirming yourself is always a low report on these discussions. And I want people to know that affirming yourself doesn't have to look like standing in the mirror and yelling out affirmations to yourself. It's about realizing that you have worth, even if you feel like others don't value you. And saying that to yourself again and again and again and starting to internalize it. What we think about really helps to shape the reality and how we see the world. So if we take time to address within ourselves areas in which we may feel less than or broken or not enough, that changes how we show up in the world. So I want to encourage everyone here. This is something that I've had to practice for myself. And I've personally learned that by having more compassion for myself and understanding the experiences that I have are common to others as well in the world, that changes how I show up for my students and my colleagues. Okay. The other thing you see listed here is expressing yourself through social action. This is really something that you have to think about in terms of what are your principles and values. So based on the outcome of this election, some people are feeling very excited, some people are feeling very discouraged. How can you express yourself in a way that is caring for yourself? So for some people, going to a protest in a safe way at this time is an act of self-care for themselves. For other people, that would be absolutely draining. So there's other types of social action that they can explore. So I want you to interpret that through the lens of what makes sense to you. But I think of it, I always think about two things when I'm going through challenges in our current reality. What is under my control and what can I contribute? And if I think about the ways in which I can best contribute to this world in ways that are in line with my values, I have this route that then feeds me. So I hope that gives you something to think about. Again, take a moment, think about something here that you are doing well or something here that you want to work. Okay, we're going to move on to our final category, and that is professional self-care practices. So again, if you are a student, I want you to think about this in the academic context. Do I take breaks during the day? Do I take time to chat with my peers? Do I create quiet time to complete tasks? Do I try to identify tasks that are exciting or rewarding? Do I set limits and boundaries? Can I balance my studying to avoid being overwhelmed? Can I arrange my study space so that it's comfortable? Do I advocate for my needs, meaning reaching out to professors, reaching out to student success teams, reaching out to CAPS? Do I have a peer support group? Do I take advantage of safe spaces created through the DIRC and other resources on campus? Or do I do none of these? Okay, so I hope I was able to articulate each of these categories so that it works for the students who are on this call today. So far, it looks like one thing that people are doing well is arranging their workspace so that it's comfortable, which is completely different when we're working from home. So this is like a new challenge that has cropped up for us, right? So many of my students say going to campus was how I got a break from everything that's going on in my life. And I did my studying in the library, right? Or I went to cafes. So this is a more of a challenge for us now, but maybe it's ranking high because it's something that we've really had to address. If you are doing your work in the same place that you then relax, you can maybe take a step to either take down your space when you're done with it or put a blanket or a cover over it so that you're not constantly looking at the work 24/7. Taking breaks during the workday, many of you said you were doing a good job of. I will tell you, for me, this has taken work. I have had to define my lunch break as 11:30 to 1 to make sure that I take a 30-minute break sometime during that time. Because what was happening is it was getting eaten up with meetings every single day. So now I know the things are going to pop up, but I know I have to protect half an hour somewhere during that time. Or, for example, today, yes, after the session ends, I will take a lunch break. Taking time to chat with people informally, just checking on people, seeing how they are, talking about other things in the world other than work. And this doesn't mean we have to talk about all of the difficult topics, but just acknowledging the humanity of each other and our need for a sense of connectedness then helps us to engage in the work in a better way. Creating quiet time to complete tasks. What does it look like? I know that someone asked about this at the beginning, so I want to spend a moment here. For me, it's not always easy. I think we always think we will have more time available to do something. So I ask my students every single week about the process in which they got their work done. And at the beginning, it was, oh, I'm just going to get my studying done in this 3 hour block. And now they're kind of realistic. Okay, well, I should probably do half an hour here and half an hour this day. And if your reality is such that you have a lot of quiet time already to devote, that's wonderful. But I'm speaking to those of us who have meetings throughout the day or other responsibilities, or those of you who are taking care of kids. And it might just be about finding that 15 minutes or 10 minutes to begin with. You can use a Pomodoro timer. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, but it basically is a 10 or 25-minute timer you can set, where you work for that 25 minutes and you take a break for 5 and you just do different cycles. For me, that really helps because I always try to set a goal. So I will meet with people on Zoom. Some of them are on the call today, and we will set a goal for what we want to get done in 25 minutes, and then we don't talk for that time. And when the timer goes off, we talk for 5 minutes, and then we keep working. So creating that time helps me know this is the time I have to work on this. I don't check email during this time. I don't surf the internet during this time. So experiment to see what works for you, but that's something that works well for me. I also have really tried to pare down the number of tasks I think I can get done in a day because I was constantly feeling overwhelmed and not successful. And so now I have 3 things on my list today. I'd love to do more than that, but I know that those are the 3 things that mean the most, that contribute the most value in my role. And that once I do those well, I will have more bandwidth to do other things. Okay. Identifying tasks that are exciting and rewarding. I realize we don't always have control over our job tasks, but if there are some things that you enjoy, you can kind of stagger them so that they're a reward and they help you build momentum to get more difficult things done. There's another expression in the business world about eating the frog, getting up and doing the most difficult task first. For me, it is very hard to be consistent with my writing. So I try to put that first, and then I do other tasks that are more rewarding throughout the day, especially in the afternoon when I've maybe lost a little bit of steam. Setting limits and boundaries. For me as a faculty member, this means not being available 24/7. And I think there's definitely a desire to be accessible, but I've learned that if I articulate to my students a balance and I make it very clear when I'm available and I honestly provide the support they need during that time, they're actually okay. We get through it. But I can basically say I respond to emails within 24 hours during the week and within 48 hours on weekends. So that way I know that it's safe for me to leave my work. And I might check in periodically, but it's not expected of me. Same thing with the evenings. When the pandemic first started, I just threw myself into the work. And it felt like a good escape from honestly everything that was going on in the world, but it wasn't sustainable. So now knowing that I need to wrap my work up around 5 has really helped me to be more realistic about what I can get done and communicate that to other people. And that helps me to balance my workload to avoid overwhelm. I will be honest with you, I am still working on taking the weekends off, but I'm at least better now at identifying times during the weekend where I am not going to focus on work. And that just gives my brain time to recharge. For many of our students, they are working throughout the week, studying throughout the week, and then they're doing the same thing on the weekends. So it may not feel easy to take a full day off, but I would challenge you to think about if you even have a 2 or 3 hour break, what can you do? And I see somebody said boundaries become more difficult in this environment. You're absolutely right. What does it look like to take a break from work when it's staring you right in the face, where you have notifications coming to your phone? One thing that I've done is I do not have notifications on my phone. I know that's frustrating for some people in my life, but it's better for me to go in and proactively check my messages and my email than to be constantly disrupted, because we actually don't multitask well. We think we do, but we can really only give ourselves to one activity at a time. So I want to invite you to find resources and experiment with ways that you can more effectively create boundaries for yourself. And don't try to do it perfectly. Know that there's going to be times where you work longer than you would like to. But after that happens, what steps are you taking to regain your balance and to care for yourself? How can you have conversations to make sure that that becomes the exception and not the norm? Because I care very much about the Titan community. I want us to get through this time with resilience. And I know that we can't do that if we just show up every single day and burn ourselves to the end. We are going to end up losing people. And I know that's something that we don't really want to think about, but we're starting to get articles about that on the national scale. They're talking about professors burning out. My students, the top stressor that they report to me is a lack of motivation to even want to get up and pull this computer screen open. And so if we can just acknowledge that this is a real thing and it doesn't mean that you're weak, and how do we begin to give you the support that you need, then we can get the work done. But this is very much foundational. Advocating for your needs means reaching out to faculty, going to office hours, showing up for the virtual resources that we have made available. And when they're not what you need, articulating, this is what I need, this is what isn't working for me. My students talk to me honestly about the struggles that they're facing, because they know that even if I can't fix it, I will validate their experiences. So if we make that type of environment available for students, where we're very clear with them about what is and isn't working and what we can do to address that, they'll feel more comfortable advocating for their needs. Lastly, having a peer support group. What does this look like? This is not the time to be isolated in your studies. Reach out to other students in your classes, in student organizations, check in on each other. Same thing for faculty and staff, people you would have been seeing on campus. Make an effort to drop a note and just ask them how they're doing. There's somebody on the call today. We have a weekly pack to check in about our writing and our exercise. And it just gives us motivation to keep going, because we know that we're there to support each other. So in this slide, I hope I've given you some ideas of what it means to have self-care in academic or professional context. Take a moment, think about one thing that you're doing well, and maybe one thing you'd like to work on. Okay, I'm going to move forward. So I'm just going to spend a moment on this, because there's a few more things I want to get to, and I want to stop time for questions. But if there are any strategies that come to mind that I did not list here, I just want to give you a moment to state them here, just so that we understand and we learn from each other as a community what might be working for us. As a reminder, I did not cover spiritual practices, and that doesn't, it does encompass faith, but it also just encompasses a sense of purpose, connecting with nature, things like that. So it's not limited solely to religion or faith. I also did not talk about relational self-care today. So I'm going to give you tools to explore that. But if there are other strategies you are currently using that you would like for each other to know about, you can list them here. Listening to music, good. Setting reasonable goals, absolutely. Feels like a luxury, doesn't it? Acknowledging your feelings, staying connected to friends, laughing with others, cleaning, good. Reflection, being okay saying no, yeah. Something I had to learn this semester, I said no to a few things that were really difficult, and walking through the process with my students of why I had to say no actually led us to a really powerful conversation where they said, we have a better idea now of how we can say no in a polite and respectful way as a result of watching you. So you never know what you're actually modeling for other people by caring for yourself. Someone else said, asking for what I need, expressing my feelings, being present for my child. Good. Asking for help. Fantastic. Great. All right. So now that you have seen these different areas, is there one particular area of self-care that you would most like to improve? If so, pick that one. But if you can't decide, you can pick multiple. So one thing that's very cool about doing these presentations is I get to see how different audiences vary. And you guys are very consistent with other audiences. Physical and emotional are almost always the top two reported, regardless of if I'm working with students or faculty or, you know, someone outside of the academic context. And the reason I do this is because I want to acknowledge that your whole well-being really matters for showing up in this space. If it didn't, the only one that you would have seen would have been professional. So we cannot cut off any aspect of ourselves. We want you to show up as your whole self. So we need to take steps to make sure that you are able to address different areas of your well-being that are most relevant to you. So wherever you are, I just want to remind you the important thing is to begin. And I also want to applaud you guys because every single person who voted said there's some aspect they want to improve. So thank you for that. All right. So before I move on and show you these tools for developing a plan, one aspect that they cover there that I think is super important is this idea of emergency self-care. Everything you all talked about is fantastic, but what can you do when you don't have time for self-care? When you aren't making those workouts, you're not planning those meals, you're not taking time to meditate because you have finals or you are working and you are taking 5 classes, 6 classes, 7 classes. You are in charge of a program that really has to deliver services to students. You are taking care of loved ones at home. All of these things leap up and compete for our attention. So what can you do for yourself when there is just no time for what you would consider to be your self-care? Very good. You've got it. Stop and breathe for 1 minute. Take a deep breath. Very good. Okay, so breathing is really showing up as a prominent theme here. And it does affect how our body responds to stress. We can actually instruct our body by taking a moment just to breathe and be present. Okay. So I like what somebody said, taking a break. Taking a break should be a part of how we get our work done. Okay. If I didn't take care of myself before this session, I would not be able to show up as my full self. So it actually is key to getting the good work done. Other people said napping, taking a short walk. I always encourage people just to go outside and see what color the sky is. And I know that sounds so silly, but I promise you at the beginning of the pandemic, people started coming back to me and saying, thank you so much. I hadn't left the house and they always knew the number in 37 days, or I haven't had a hug in 50 days. This is something that we really have to start talking about. We can't just expect people to hold this together. We have to find ways for people to feel connected and to be able to like come down from the stress that they're feeling. Be aware when your brain has gotten stuck in a spin, get up from your desk for a few minutes, listen to at least one calming song and just relax. Yeah. And I encourage you all, because you're not on camera right now, feel free to stand up and stretch and do whatever you need to. I try to do yoga in the mornings because it helps connect my mind and body. And I do it before I start the day because I know I'm going to have a lot of things coming at me and it may not be as easy to prioritize. So I try to do a lot of my self-care in the morning or evenings, but even in a day where you don't feel like you have time, this is giving you a list of ideas that you can try out. So thank you all so much for providing your thoughts here. I actually have a playlist. I think it's public on my YouTube that I created just to affirm me. And I just can let it play if I'm having a really hard time. And it's going to remind me of good thoughts. Okay. Good job, everyone. Close your eyes for a while. I like that too. So now let's connect this. We're getting to the close here. I'm going to have some time for questions, but I want to have you all just reflect on why this is important. How does your self-care practice impact those that you currently serve? So if you are faculty or staff or management, you either have staff you serve, you have students that you serve. How does your self-care impact them? If you are a student, think about the people that you are currently serving or supporting. So it can be how you're showing up in your family relationships. It can be about your work context, or it can be about the population that you plan to serve through your work. So even if you are in business and you are trying to launch a product, there is a population that you're serving. So I just want to give you a moment to make this connection. How does my self-care practice impact those that I either currently serve or hope to serve? Good. Someone says I'm able to be present and be my best self. I'm able to be more focused during my work. Yes, absolutely. It gives me the strength to help. I can be more present for my kids. Good. I can't give if I'm running on empty. Absolutely. Can be more compassionate, be better and more present leader and parent. Good. Helps me to be able to handle the stress of the day. Exactly. Now you're getting to the core of resilience. And now you're seeing resilience isn't an input. It's not about showing up and being resilient. Resilience is an output. We have to put something into ourselves. So you're putting this care in that now allows you to be more resilient. It impacts the way that you communicate with others, for sure. My students who work really closely with me, they know when I'm stressed. They're like, okay, Dr. JP, you should relax a little bit. And it's terrible, but it's true. I get stressed just like the rest of you all. And by taking a moment to care for myself, I'm able to show up in the true, authentic, like helpful manner that I actually want to be in when I'm serving others. Okay. So, what are specific ways that you can model self care for those that you serve? Again, whether it's work, whether it is relationships in your life that matter to you, how can you model self care for those that you serve? Honoring boundaries. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I think even just the effort makes it better. I am definitely not perfect with mine, but they're getting a lot better than they were at the beginning of the pandemic. Sharing your own practices, staying focused on your priorities, saying no when needed. I wrote something down recently. Saying yes doesn't just mean I will do this. This means I'm committing the time and resources to make it happen. And I think there's many times when we say yes, but it's not actually a yes because we're not committing what it takes to show up and get the job done. So we probably need to be thinking more carefully about when we say yes and when we say no. And sometimes saying yes to one thing means saying no to others. Ask them about their self care, taking breaks, taking deep breaths together, slowing down and being present. Keep in mind, you're either modeling for them how they can care for themselves or you're modeling how to neglect. Okay. I know that's a harsh word, but when we are in a professional context and we are modeling for others what it means to show up as a professional, they are getting messages from us about how we should work, how we should deal with stress. And that becomes their lesson on how to be a professional. So think about that when you think about what you are actually communicating to people. We can't just say, do as I say and not as I do. People learn from what we do. Good. In the classroom, what I often do at the beginning of the class is just ask students how they're doing and just validating that feeling before we get started with the material, I think is really helpful. Normalizing therapy, absolutely. Yep. I know it makes a difference that I come on here and I'm honest with you all about how therapy has benefited my life because then people realize I'm not just saying it and they also don't think of me as somebody who doesn't need it. A lot of my personal journey has been informed by the cognitive behavioral approaches that I've benefited from learning in therapy. Okay, so the next question is what are barriers to your self care practice? What comes up for you that gets in the way of doing this? So for many of us, time is a barrier. And that's why I want to really emphasize with this training, we are not trying to change everything overnight. We are trying to find small ways to start integrating self-care into your current life. When it comes to financial resources, we want to acknowledge that basic needs need to be secured first before people can prioritize other things. But I really want to make sure I'm providing practices to you that are freely available so that that doesn't have to be a hindrance and you can share it with others in your lives. I will provide some notes on where you can begin, including starting with the self care plan. About this guilt and prioritizing your needs, we learn how to deal with it, but it doesn't go away. We are in a society that really just inculcates in us this need to always show up for others and neglect ourselves. And so I think you just get better at finding ways to acknowledge that and know that you give your best when you are taking care of yourself. The motivation, I definitely understand that that is a great stressor. And that is why I try to identify areas that are most meaningful for you and have you start there and build momentum by taking small steps. So I'm going to do these last few very quickly because I want you to have time for questions, but I'm just going to see if we have any immediate thoughts here. What can you do to address these barriers and remind yourself to practice self-care? Just think about factors that are under your control. So you don't have to change the world. I'm thinking about what you can do to make life better for yourself during these times. So how can you remind yourself to practice self-care, or how can you address barriers of time and make it realistic for yourself? Good. Yep. Time management. Absolutely. Good. Okay. Making it a priority. Good. Setting limits. What is enough work for one day, right? Setting reminders. Okay, good. I'm going to go ahead and move on because you guys seem to really have this good idea. Set an alarm for self care, limiting social media. Good. Good. Okay. So this is the self-care toolkit, and I'm going to ask Cecil to go ahead and put this link in the chat. I think she's going to do it as a follow-up, actually, now that I think about it. You will be receiving this. It is a 4-step strategy to developing a self-care plan. So it is going to help you identify what are your current approaches to dealing with stress. Then you're going to do a self-care assessment, which goes through each of the areas that we talked about today and provides additional examples. And you'll be able to rate how well you are doing in certain areas. From there, you're actually going to develop a plan that gives you current and future practices. And finally, you will do an emergency self-care plan that will help you think about what you can do to practice self-care when you don't have time for it. So I do have videos on YouTube that walk through how to address every step of that. So if you're interested in doing this, I'm going to show you the playlist that will help guide you through that. Once you develop your plan, I want you to identify at least one person who you can share your plan with and decide how frequently you can review it. I would encourage you to have that person complete a plan as well. Again, this is a free resource available online. Once you do this plan, try it out for maybe a week. There's different scales you can take to see if it's really helping your well-being, or you can just reflect on how do I feel as a result of doing this, and then make changes so that it's more practical and addresses the areas that are most important to you. I'm going to show you very quickly what this plan looks like, just so that you have a visual. So if you go to the site, again, you're going to get this resource via email. You're going to first fill out your current lifestyle behaviors, both negative and positive. This is the self-care assessment. And you can see many of the things that we talked about today are here, and you just are going to rate how often you do them. The actual self-care worksheet, I would give yourself maybe 30 minutes to an hour to do this all together. And we actually do this in my class, my stress management class here on campus, but they go through and they figure out, what is my current practice? What do I want to do in the future? And then you talk about different barriers and how you're going to address them. And maybe you address one of your negative coping strategies. And lastly, I mentioned the emergency self-care plan. That is located here. And what I do with this sheet, I think about what's good for me when I'm upset, who can help support me in my life, what can I say to myself, and what to avoid when I'm having a hard time. And I take this sheet and I keep it nearby. Since we're at home a lot right now, it's near my desk. But usually when people are out and about, I tell them to take a picture and keep it on their cell phone, just so that they remember, this is what I said I would do for myself. So at the close of this presentation today, something you can just take away, it's very concrete, noting how you feel, enforcing healthy boundaries, figuring out what that looks like in your life, focusing on what you can control, and then taking concrete action in line with your purpose. These are my closing steps on how you can begin. And developing a self-care plan, I cannot underline that enough. I revise mine frequently. It changes along with my needs in my life, but it really has helped change my life. I will provide additional resources. This is an article I wrote that is also on the Fullerton website. I wrote this at the beginning of the pandemic, and it just gave us just an immediate steps that we could take to help do self-care while we're going through this time. And I want to remind you of the You at Fullerton resource that we have. This is a very big deal. Select CSU campuses have access to this resource because it is a financial investment, but it really has given people resources to be able to learn about different issues that we're going through right now. And it's very customized to your own experiences. Since I see David popping up, would you like to take a moment to address CAPS and other resources? Okay, let's see. Let's make sure you're unmuted. And while he does that, I'm just going to let my resources that I have show.
Portia, thank you for the wonderful presentation. It's great to see some of your resources, and I will be using those and helping people connect with those resources as well. I want to remind everyone here that if you are a student, you're going to be getting a link to the CAPS website. And there's not only our services and support, whether it be individual consultations, individual therapy, the drop-in groups, there's also a list of low-cost community referrals there. So whether it's services for yourself or perhaps a family member, a friend, if somebody's struggling right now in our area, we can find you support options. There's also 211 OC. We'll send you that link so you can get some more county resources related to mental health services. And if you are a staff member, I want to remind you of the EAP services. So, for staff members, you can get like 6 sessions to help you address an issue. So we'll send you that link. It's just kind of a reminder, here's where you would go if you wanted to get connected and get some professional support. Like Portia said, election stress, the pandemic, racial inequality issues, division, financial stressors. There's just so much going on right now. So the more that we can be proactive and intentional, I think that's a thing that we all have to do together to help each other as we proceed forward. Thank you for your time, and back to Portia.
Thank you so much for that. And so I want to say thank you everyone for your time today. I do have additional thoughts on organizational approaches, but given the audience we had today, I just wanted to focus on individual level strategies. So I'm happy to continue the conversation. People have additional questions. I will be developing videos in weeks to come. For this remaining time, I know we don't have much time together, but if people have 1 or 2 questions, I'm happy to take those. And I just want to say thank you so much for your energy, time, and attention today. This is very much appreciated. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to engage the entire campus in this discussion, and I hope it's the first of many. Thank you. You're welcome. How can we create a culture of self-care within our respective areas? So I do actually have a slide on this. That's what I was mentioning. Since these resources will be sent to you all, so let me go ahead and move past that. Something that can be done at the organizational level is identifying and addressing workplace stressors, finding opportunities for people to engage in positive stress coping behaviors. So creating space for, even just like little Zoom happy hours, or talking about what are we doing to address stress? How can we brainstorm different challenges we have to go through? How can we create a culture in which sustainable performance is a priority? Because we don't want to burn people out. We don't want to have constant knowledge transfer and loss of knowledge transfer when people are suddenly going through burnout. How can we make these changes part of the organizational structure through policies and procedures? And so for leaders, this means shifting the culture by acting as a champion. And I'm just going to go over a moment or two to get through this, if that's okay. Encouraging staff and students to engage in best practices, asking for help, communicating concerns, maintaining work-life boundaries, delegating wherever possible, and recharging using available benefits and resources. And I actually encourage you to model these practices by taking off this idea that you have to be a hero, and don't reward or reinforce being a work martyr. A lot of the times we think if we work all the time, we say yes to everything, that's going to get us ahead, but it doesn't actually get better work done, and it leads to people burning out. So we want to think about rewarding people doing consistent, sustainable performance. And I actually do have an opportunity here for those of you who are still on this call. If you have ideas on different practices, resources you can utilize, I'm interested in hearing what resources that we currently have are helping you practice self-care, or what resources, policies, or practices can help you address barriers. What do you need? So the first question is, what do we have currently that you can use? And the second question is, what can we provide to help you? And I will take this anonymous feedback back to DIEP. So at this time, I'm going to stop speaking and just leave the survey open in case any of you have thoughts that you can offer at this time. Again, there will be no revealing of your identity because you haven't put anything into Mentimeter. It will be completely anonymous. But thank you for asking that question because it gave me permission to finish by coming back to how do we create a culture of self-care. For those of you who are faculty, I want to invite you to think about what can we do to do this in the classroom. How do we acknowledge the whole well-being of our students and help them to accomplish their academic goals? Yes, exactly. Exactly. How do we shift our culture to make self-care a priority? Because we will get through this time. We will. And on the other side, we're going to continue to have challenges. So we have to think about the ways in which we are addressing this and the extent to which we're being proactive and making sure that we realize we serve a community of people who have personal and professional priorities, and the work-life conflict that they experience. Not only does it affect their well-being in negative ways, it also affects what we're able to accomplish as a community. So I want to thank you for letting me take that additional 3 minutes to sort of tease these ideas, but I hope they will lead to more conversation. Exactly. Normalize taking breaks before being forced to take them. I will tell you, I've been a professor between different CSU campuses for about 6.5 years now. And this is the first year that I am going to take fall break. I've never taken fall break, and I still don't know how I'm going to actually make myself do it because there's such a temptation to use it to get work done. But I know that at this point, I really need it to finish the semester strong. So we have to have these conversations and talk about what gets in the way of that being a reality. And for many of us, campus breaks don't mean a break for us. Many staff are here working. And so how do we protect their well-being and promote their care? And this is something that I've been looking at in my research and will be publishing on in the next year or two to come, the work that I've been doing with the CSU staff to look at what can help to promote and protect their well-being. Yes, we want to make sure that we take steps to promote work-life balance. And I know balance feels mythical for all of us. So I think perhaps I always tell people when we think about balancing, figure out which balls are glass and which ones are rubber, which ones will bounce right back so you can let them go for a little bit, and which ones will completely crumble. So we have to be able to prioritize. Everything cannot be a priority. And I think that's something that we really have to wrestle with in education. Well, I'm happy to take any further questions. If you have them, you can submit them through the chat or they'll pop up here as a comment. But otherwise, I want to give those of you who are gathered here the encouragement to go on with your day, but please take a break and think about how you are going to acknowledge this in your life and start to create space for it. I'm happy to have you reach out to me. My email, I will make sure that it's listed as a resource because I want to continue having this conversation with our community. So thank you all for your time, and it's been an honor to be able to address our community. Thank you. You're very welcome.